Hey, what's up everybody? It's Andy from CleanSwifter.com, and I'm back here to talk about another refactoring in my video series covering Martin Fowler's book, Refactoring, Improving the Design of Existing Code. This week we're going to talk about Inline Method, and it's a refactoring which is actually the exact opposite of the refactoring we talked about last time, Extract Method. So with Extract Method, it was all about taking common functionality from a larger piece of code and extracting it into a new method. With Inline Method, it's doing the exact opposite, where you're going to take code that's in a method and delete that method and move the functionality back to where it's called from. This is useful for a couple reasons. In one case, if the code that is being called is so simplistic that really putting in a different method only distracts you when reading the code that calls it, you might as well just move it back to the original place. Another reason you may want to do it is that if you have a series of different methods that are all called from a bigger method, and those other methods that are being called are smaller, you can then move that functionality back to the original method, delete all those other little smaller methods, and then once the functionality is condensed back in the original place, then extract that as one method that then serves a better purpose in being a cohesive unit of code that actually does something. So we're not going to do that right now. First, we're just going to look at Inline Method all by itself. So let's take a look at an example. So here we have some code that basically calculates the length of a hypotenuse according to the Pythagorean theorem. So this code right here adds the squares two numbers, which is the base and height sides of a right triangle, adds those together, and then takes the square root of the result, and then that's the length of the hypotenuse of the right triangle. So you can see that, yeah, this is, reading this line of code by itself is pretty decent. I can read this and understand what it's doing. But then I look at all these methods that are being called, and all of these are really just doing a single line of code, which is just a built-in mathematical function. What I'm going to propose here along the Inline Method Refactoring is that we delete all three of these methods and move this functionality just to be directly included with this method. So let's do this one by one. Starting in the middle, we have the numbers being squared. So that's going to be my target method to first delete. So I can see that this is just multiplying two numbers together. Simple enough. So then I can come down here and square the numbers directly. And now since square is no longer being called, I'll delete that. And voila, that is the Inline Method Refactoring. So I'm going to do this again for add. I can then delete add, delete the call to add here, and instead just put that functionality directly in this line. And now you can see that I'm adding the result of the methods being squared. Add's no longer called, delete that. And the same thing, square root, which is just a wrapper on the foundation function for doing the same thing. I can then delete this and instead call the foundation function directly. And you can see, now here's the refactored result. Now this example is kind of simplistic, but I think the simplisticness of it is a good example of when you'd want to do this refactoring. In each of these cases, in each of these methods that I deleted, there was one line of code which called a function right from foundation. Add, multiply, and square root. So when looking at this code, it's like, I think it's much more obvious now what it does, and there's not these extraneous methods that cause my eyes to jump around. Now imagine that you're doing this in a class or in a series of classes where those methods being called actually existed in a different place. So not only did you have to look somewhere else, but where you had to look was in a totally different file. For me, that jumping around, especially when the method is so simple, I think it's better served just to have it right in line with the code that is performing the function. So again, it's just a tool to add to your toolbox. Inline Method appears in Martin Fowler's book, Refactoring, Improving the Design of Existing Code. And you can buy it in the link in the description for this video. And again, check out the original post on my blog, CleanSwifter.com. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.